Hi, good morning everyone. It's really nice to be here. As Alan said, I'm here representing Enterprise Ireland. And Enterprise Ireland is a government organisation, a state organisation, and we part with Irish SMEs to help them grow, start, innovate and scale their companies into global markets. And Enterprise Ireland has a very keen focus on digitalisation, and we recognise it to be critical to Irish SMEs sustaining and achieving a level of growth. And we as a development agency are partnering with Irish SMEs as they embark and start on that digital continuum and digital journey. My own background, I started my career actually in the construction sector before I moved into manufacturing to solely work on digital systems for process improvement and business process optimisation. I worked for Irish SMEs in the manufacturing sector, and then I joined a CAD company called Autodesk, where I had a portfolio of global companies working in the building product manufacturing space. So that area brought me kind of to the intersection of product lifecycle management and building information modelling. So I'm really excited and thankful to Alan and the guys from CitA for having us along to speak at this event. And I'm going to speak to business readiness for digital projects and how to prepare your organisation for disruption. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I feel this is one of the most relevant statements that Peter Drucker has stated. Peter Drucker is a well-known strategic business author. And I feel this statement is so relevant because it really captures why change management is critical as you start looking towards, embarking on a digital journey. And I think this, what Peter really recognise and what he's referring to here is that no matter how well designed your digital plans are, they'll fall flat on their face unless your culture buys into the journey and where you're trying to get to. And Peter Drucker was a firm believer that, for change to be truly embedded into an organisation in an effective manner, that leadership really had to buy into that change, commit to that change, set the direction of where the organisation needed to go to, set the tone, establish expectations and lead by example. And Enterprise Ireland, we work closely with Irish SMEs to support leadership to set the right direction as they're embarking on a journey of digital. So when implementing digital transformations, when they're implemented correctly, the value to be realised is endless in terms of driving inefficiencies addressing inefficiencies across your value chain, helping organisations adopt new methods such as modern methods of construction, helping organisations adopt new capabilities across their teams, helping you address better integration with your supply chain and better collaboration across your teams, as well as enabling your teams to focus on higher value and higher impactful tasks by leveraging the power of digital. So the opportunity with digital is endless. And what really defines digital transformation sets it apart from traditional projects is just that piece on it being transformative for your business. And that, as I said, those value-based outcomes is what really sets it apart from traditional implementations of software and software solutions. Yet many digital transformations fail. And McKinsey has aggregated data on globally, they're seeing 70% of digital transformations failing. And why is that? That's because people haven't rethought how they deliver digital and how they bring people on that journey of digital. Organisations are still delivering digital in a traditional fashion, and a traditional fashion typically keeps people in the dark, and it's at the very end, of your implementation cycle where your people, are brought onto digital platforms and systems, and it sets chaos in your organisation. So organisations need to think from the outset how they think beyond the technology as they embark on a digitalisation journey and a digital transformation. Because digital transformation, as you well know, and actually, sorry, I'm going to change. I hate the term digital transformation because I think it sounds intimidating and it sounds exhausting. So I'm going to start saying digitally enabled transformation where applicable. And I think that's, a very relevant point when people start talking about digital to their organisation as well, that they need to think about where those people are coming from and dumb it down and tailor your language appropriately. So, with digitalisation transitions or digitally enabled transformation, it cuts across 4 key dimensions. And, people should be at the forefront of your mind here in terms of what are the skills and capabilities that our organisation doesn't have that we need to embrace to really be effective with digital tools and embrace digital tools. Because it's no longer about using digital tools, it's about embracing the tools, optimising the tools to really maximise how you get benefit out from digital. And then, obviously digitalisation ties clearly to your business purpose, and that's the purpose and the vision that all your people have bought into as well. So bear that in mind as you're bringing digital in as a core piece of your business model. And then digital has an impact on your processes, and these are the processes that your people engage with on a day-to-day basis. And you need to start considering where are our process gaps, and how are we going to re-engineer some of our processes or rethink those processes to really embrace digital in its most effective way. And then finally, technology is one piece, but it's an important piece, but it's not the most important piece. And, as I said, I've come from a background where I've implemented digital systems, and in the past, I have been working with companies where we have taken a technology-led approach. With adopting technologies, we focus too much on the technology and not enough on the adoption. And in those instances, what you risk happening if you focus so much on the technology is that, either it'll take longer for your organisation to onboard and adopt that technology, or ultimately you could just risk the whole initiative going under altogether, which would be a real damage to really have a dent on your productivity and both your revenue. Okay, so digital is disruptive. It's highly disruptive. And before you think about how you manage that disruption, you just have to accept that it's going to happen. It's going to be disruptive for your business, hopefully in a positive way at the end of your transition, but it's also going to be highly disruptive for your employees, because you're asking your employees to change the way they work and adopt new behaviours and new habits to effectively, use digital capabilities in your workflows. And like in a former life, when I used to work as a digitalisation implementation consultant, I would think, when you meet resistance or, when you meet resistance from your stakeholders and from your people because there's a level of disruption for a period, I often thought that resistance spawned from people feeling somewhat threatened by the digital capabilities, that their own remit and scope was perhaps going to be reduced and marginalised. Like sometimes, digital causes a level of chaos, and you can find that people tend to get territorial. However, it really goes much deeper than that. It's neurological, because when you're affecting a change and when you're asking people to change the way they're working, you're just naturally making them feel unsafe because you've brought something quite unpredictable into their world. And with that, like when people feel unsafe, that causes a high degree of stress. And when people feel stressed, they stop listening. And if your people stop listening, they're going to stop learning. And remember that there will be no change on your digital journey if there is no learning. So I think every time you bring in a digital project, always say to yourself that you're making your people feel unsafe. And then how are you going to proactively assure and reassure people during that period of unpredictability? Okay, so I've spoken a little bit about kind of the what and the why, and I'm just going to touch a bit on the opportunity with digital from a cultural perspective. So digital, it can naturally affect change. It can actually be the catalyst for change. In a perfect world, we'd love to see clients or organisations or companies or SMEs start by re-engineering their processes and looking at, every facet of their cultural needs. But in some cases, organisations, have a short-term need on digital, and that can expose holes in your culture. And digital can then serve as an opportunity to rethink what sort of culture do you want to architect in your organisation to really, set yourselves up for success with how you optimise and effectively use digital tools. And again, I'm going to go back to the point that it's not about just using the tools, it's about maximising the value and the return from those tools. So with that in mind, as you're considering about becoming a digital company, and sorry, I just want to touch on what I think of a digital company is. A digital company is not a company that occasionally does digital projects. It's a company that puts digital at the core of their business model. And it's a company that is constantly thinking ahead in terms of, how we can drive value-based outcomes by leveraging digital. A company that's constantly modernising to drive efficiencies across their full value chain by leveraging digital. So in terms of becoming a digital culture or adopting a digital culture, a few key areas or a few key considerations would be, put the customer central to every digital program that you're driving. So always make sure that the value of your digital program maps back to your customer experience. And by that I mean, look at how you can leverage customer data and information to drive better experiences and new experience for your customer. And that's something that your whole organisation can get behind as well in terms of how they use that customer data. And then next up, as you're looking at digital and considering a good culture to embed digital in, look at, how open and collaborative is your culture across your teams. How can digital, support breaking down those silos to increase your productivity across your teams. I know construction projects, having worked in the sector for a period, collaboration is so important, and transparency is so important. So apply the level of transparency that you'd like to see on key projects to your own internal teams. And then innovation, I would think about, as you're onboarding to new tools and new solutions, how you can rethink, your culture around embedding an innovation mindset within your organisation. Innovation should be something that can be driven from any person in your organisation at any time, but it's too undefined to say to your organisation, be more innovative. Individuals and people need to have the right methodologies and the right tools to support that culture of innovation. And Enterprise Ireland works quite closely with clients in terms of helping them, onboard and train around areas such as design thinking or other methodologies such as lean and agile and storytelling to increase their productivity. And then with that innovation mindset, which should be tightly coupled to that, is a digital first mindset. And that's back to my point about becoming a digital company. And this is a fundamental shift for organisations, because traditionally, digital was often, or I'm going to say technology. Technology was sometimes there for technology's sake. And in other instances, technology has been there to respond to a crisis such as COVID, which we've all seen lately. And I feel, although COVID has been highly destructive for organisations. In some ways, it has forced the topic around digital for organisations as well. So being a digital first mindset is back to, or being a digital first company is just back to that point about, you know, taking a proactive approach to digital, moving from reactive projects. And then, you know, looking at how you create a good sense of urgency around digitalisation programmes. So with digital programmes, there's a lot of risk involved, and that risk has to be managed, and it has to be owned by the whole organisation. And I love the phrase that if there's no urgency, desire loses value, because it really conveys how, you know, it's really important to get the right momentum around your initiatives to make sure that the whole organisation, you know, feels motivated and is willing to row in behind your digital initiatives. Okay, so I just wanted to touch a little bit on, you know, just to the point of proactive change management and how, you know, change management will serve you well throughout the course of a digital transition. So there's many change management models out there. This is just one model, the ADKAR model, which was developed in the 90s. Another model would be, that we see quite often, is the 8 stages Kotter model. But what I really like about the ADKAR model as a change management model is that it puts the user and the individual and the employee at the centre of your change. And any change, because digital is change, and any change programme will only be successful if that individual is willing to change. So the ADKAR model, you know, cuts across five distinct phases or zones, with the first zone being around awareness, so awareness for those individuals and employees. And you need to start considering early, like I don't think it's ever, there's no early enough, like you need to communicate and raise awareness of any change as early as possible. And with that, you know, around the awareness piece, like the outcome of this phase is that the individual gets an understanding of what that impact of the change, what's the impact of the change in terms of how they work, and what's the expectations on them in terms of to support that change. And following your awareness phase, you know, the desire phase then looks at that back to the individual. You're establishing that early feedback loop with your organisation to get their thoughts on the change that you're proposing and the digital programme that you're aspiring to work towards. And that's a really key area, because getting that early feedback allows you to de-risk your project. It gives you, you know, food for thought. It gives you the opportunity to rethink some areas of your project or programme. And beyond desire, then you're looking at knowledge. So with every digital programme, with every transformation, knowledge is key, because as I said earlier, you're asking people to work in a very, very different way, and you need to invest in helping them onboard new skills, new capability. And this is the area that you need to have, you know, a very structured plan around training, coaching and mentoring to help those individuals upskill or reskill and bring in new capabilities into your organisation. And following swiftly on, then it's into the action phase. So the action phase is taking that knowledge and converting that to applied applications. And you shouldn't, you know, onboarding is also very, very important. This is where, you know, your individuals, your users, your employees need the confidence to start working with those digital tools. And this is where you should look to, which I'll speak to in a minute, look to super users and champions to help with that onboarding activity. And then in the final phase, and it's usually the most difficult phase, is reinforcement. And this is normally often a phase which is overlooked. And it's overlooked because, you know, you launch a digital solution, you launch a digital tool set, you launch a platform to your organisation, and you're on to the next area of focus, you're on to the next initiative, the next project. But you need to take the time to reinforce the new ways of working, the new capability. to take the feedback from those users as they're learning to work with those new tools and, adopt your support model accordingly. Because if you skip the reinforcement phase, you risk people reverting back to old practices, redundant practices, and perhaps even bypassing the new solutions that you've brought into your organisation. So stakeholder analysis and stakeholder impact analysis. So just another key consideration for setting yourself up for success as you embark on a digital journey is just conducting effective stakeholder analysis and stakeholder impact analysis. So I'm going to refer back to the traditional way of, implementing digital, and stakeholder analysis, often looked at who your key sponsors were, who your functional stakeholders were, who your project manager was, who your vendors were, who your technology partners were. It was very much focused on project or program mobilization. But that's a missed opportunity. If you're doing stakeholder analysis before a digital step, you should look more towards organisational mobilisation. And with that, you need to look across all the stakeholders, across all the people, assess the capability gap that you currently have and how you're going to address that capability gap. And then on the impact analysis, if it's done effectively, it'll give you early sight of that phase and that point that I had on the ADKAR model around desire in your organisation and appetite to change. And one very important area that should come out of your stakeholder impact analysis or your stakeholder analysis is that, by having a sense check on your organisation's appetite to change, is that you'll be able to quickly identify and qualify who your digital champions are, who your active resistors are, and who your passive resistors are. So your digital champions, and give this time, build, be proactive about gathering your champions, because they're the influencers that are going to get the wider network on board and get within your organisation, and they're going to be able to sell the value of digital technologies. And they'll also, in many cases, digital champions do become super users of systems and solutions, and they can do a lot of heavy lifting around, the onboarding and adoption piece if we're thinking about that ADKAR model again. So give the digital champions time, and as I said, this is going to be your most important alliance, and you need to think about who's the right person to get on board as a champion, who's demonstrating the appetite, who is the influence. But then you also need to think about how are you going to keep that champion incentivised. And where I've either recruited champions in a former life or I've been a champion myself, and what I want as a champion is I want early visibility into the roadmap and programme. Okay, sorry, I better move along. I'll move along swiftly, sorry. Okay, but I will just a very quick point. The active resistors they're the guys who are vocal, or the guys and the girls who are vocal. You'll know them, they're moaning and groaning. It's the passive resistors that you need to watch for. No news doesn't always mean good news. So make sure you're talking to your people, make sure you're consulting with them, and get your digital champions to embrace those passive resistors to get them on board, because if they go the other way, you have a big wall of resistance to get over. Okay, so I'm going to move on very swiftly because Alan's giving me death looks here. So design. So back to that awareness piece. Design a communication strategy that fits your company. As I said, it's never too early to communicate. It's never too early to make people aware. And the benefits are threefold. A good communication strategy and plan builds trust across your organisation, because back to that piece around feeling unsafe, people know what's expected. People feel valued and considered, and again that will help with the subsequent buy-in as you're asking them to just give a little bit more when they're onboarding to digital tools. And then finally, communication, it informs leadership, so make sure that your communication plan supports a dual communication two-way flow, so that you're bringing the concerns of your people and questions back to the decision makers. And I will just say around communication, make it make a plan that fits your company, use language that fits your company, like dumb it down, keep it simple, because I think, you know, on digital, and having been, you know, a person that's seen campaigns quite vividly on digitalisation in many different organisations, we can make that too complex. So just keep it really simple. Then finally, look, plan to deliver value early and build trust. Okay, so I'm just going to make a point that, you know, digital technologies, they've never been easier to access, easier to configure, easier to implement. You know, we're living in a world of cloud services, low code, no code models, and we should be delivering digital in a very iterative way to de-risk your project. But that doesn't just de-risk your project, helps your people as well, because they can consume things in a bite-sized way. So just keep that in mind as you're constructing your digital roadmap. And then just to the same point, you know, plan to deliver value early and build trust. Look, this was just a point around traditionally when we looked at like effort versus impact and defining a digital scope, where should we start? It was always effort versus impact on the complexity around the implementation and the complexity to build. And I don't feel that companies always put the emphasis on complexity to onboard. And sometimes, you know, you mightn't start with the most impactful app from a business, from a business perspective, but it might be the easiest application or solution just to get your people onboarded with, and then so that you can then extend on that and bring in higher valued applications at a later stage. Then finally, look, demonstrate, you know, I spoke earlier about fostering a digital culture and bringing in those values, and demonstrate all those values throughout the course of your digitalisation roadmap and your digital implementation. You know, as I mentioned, adopt that customer-centric approach, you know, and adopt a collaborative project team approach, foster that innovation and digital mindset, and be agile and iterative, and constantly take your learnings back into your program and tweak when you need to tweak your scope. But like, there's no better place to demonstrate that you're working to those values than your own digitalisation roadmap and digital program. Okay, and then very finally, so as I said at the very start, Enterprise Ireland, we're working with Irish SMEs and client companies across all stages of a digital project lifecycle, from evaluation to assess, design, implement, adopt. And it cuts across all the dimensions that I've mentioned earlier, from leadership to capability building to bringing in new processes and approaches. And if you are an Enterprise Ireland client, I would encourage you to speak to your DA, your development advisor, to understand more how you can engage with our offerings around digital. And if you're not an Enterprise Ireland, Enterprise Ireland client, I would encourage that you may be eligible under the Built to Innovate scheme. So what I would encourage, if you're active in the residential home building sector, so I would encourage you to take a look on the Built to Innovate scheme on Enterprise Ireland's website. Sorry, now I'm... Time? Sorry? Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.